So I've been covering here the just rampant propaganda that you're seeing in the corporate media. I mean, between the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, the New Yorker, the Daily Beast, the Associated Press, MSNBC, CNN, it's almost like they all got in a room and they just coordinate which day. So, like, New York Times, you have Monday. Tuesday, Washington Post, you're Tuesday. Politico, you're Wednesday. Associated Press, you're Thursday. Every day is a different hit piece on Bernie Sanders. And the majority of these pieces are factually inaccurate, are rank propaganda, and just totally insane. I mean, I've never seen this level of coordinated smears and propaganda against a political candidate. I've never. And I've been covering politics for a while. So, this corporate media propaganda is, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to debunk all this. And now NBC News has allowed one of the most serial liars slash propagandists who shouldn't have a public forum at all, who shouldn't have a public forum because he's simply a propagandist. They are allowing him to publish basically nonsensical falsehoods about Bernie Sanders. Can you take a guess who this is that NBC News helped and let publish just total nonsense about Bernie Sanders? I'll give you a few minutes. He is connected to Hillary Clinton's world. He has lied about Bernie Sanders basically for 3 years, and he is known as one of basically the biggest smear artists in politics other than Roger Stone on the Democratic side. David, oh my God, Ernie, you got it right away. Ernie, you get the victory. David Brock. So NBC News lets David Brock publish this ridiculous piece. I ain't going to read the whole thing, but Bernie Sanders fans can't be allowed to poison another Democratic primary with personal attacks. First of all, he talks about Bernie Sanders like he's a musician. His fans, these aren't his fans. These are his voters, his supporters. And he pushes the bullshit narrative, bashing Beto O'Rourke and every other Democrat doesn't help liberals' cause in 2020. It only helps Trump. So right there, David Brock is basically using the Democratic Party playbook of thou shalt not criticize other Democrats. We need to be unified, which is another way of saying, please stop talking about the money we take from Wall Street. Please stop talking about the money we take from fossil fuel companies. Please stop talking about the money we take from Big Pharma. Please stop talking about the money we give to Big Pharma. Please, please, please stop talking about the money we take from real estate developers who are gentrifying all of America and pushing poor people out. Please stop talking about the money we're taking from Facebook and Google and YouTube. Please stop attacking us for being corrupt. David Brock, he's pushing the same Hillary Clinton narrative that Bernie Sanders or progressives talking about Hillary Clinton or Beto O'Rourke's record, their donations, their voting record, is a personal attack. Of course, that's ludicrous. Bernie Sanders didn't talk about Hillary Clinton's wardrobe on the campaign trail. He didn't talk about Monica Lewinsky or any of that. He talked about she voted for the Iraq War. He talked about, well, she takes a lot of money from Wall Street, so how could you really be trusted to actually take it aggressively against Wall Street? That's her record. And this is what the Democratic corporate establishment does. They try and distract and deflect by saying if you call Beto O'Rourke or you call Hillary Clinton out or you call Joe Biden out. And by the way, Joe Biden is as bad as Hillary Clinton on all of the votes. He's as big of a warmonger. He voted for NAFTA. He drafted the crime bill that Bill Clinton signed. He drafted that crime bill that Hillary Clinton called black people super predators. He voted for welfare reform, voted to deregulate the banks, voted for the bankruptcy bill, which made it harder for single mothers and working people to get credit. He voted for a lot of terrible things. So now it's a personal attack. Personal attack. So I'll read you some of this. I'm hardly the only political observer who blames Hillary Clinton's general election defeat to Donald Trump in part on personal attacks on Clinton, first made by Bernie Sanders and his backers. Those attacks from her left laid the groundwork for copycat attacks lobbed by Donald Trump, and in the process, helped hand the Supreme Court to the right wing for a generation. Don't believe yourself? Don't believe me? Ask yourself who said that. And then he writes a list of things that Trump said, and some of them Bernie said. The ones that Bernie said are actually on policy. So like number 2, I don't think you're qualified if you get $15 million from Wall Street through your super PAC. That's not a personal attack. That's attack on her political decisions. So personal would be her personality, things like that. This is pointing out, how could you be trusted to regulate Wall Street, to prosecute Wall Street, to do anything against Wall Street when you've taken $15 million from Wall Street through a super PAC? Not a personal attack. But the thing that I really find amazing and rich about this, and shame on NBC News, but what do you expect? By the way, I've reached out to that journalist who left NBC News and basically on his way out wrote a memo calling them a bunch of warmongers and calling them out for the Trump circus. Isn't it rich that NBC News, which isn't news, it's basically an arm of the Democratic Party and establishment, isn't it rich that NBC News allows David Brock, who, not figuratively, literally, is in charge of a paid troll army. Correct the record, is a paid troll army that sends out disinformation, that has put out memes and disinformation and deflections and falsehoods about Bernie Sanders, about Nina Turner, about Tulsi Gabbard, about Keith Ellison, about me, about Jimmy Dore, about journalists they don't like, about politicians they don't like. That this man, that this scoundrel, that this smear artist is writing about Bernie Sanders and personal attacks. This is like going. This would be like going to Hitler and asking him what he thinks about, I don't know, empowering Jewish artists. It's insane. NBC News is literally publishing a propaganda artist who is in charge of a paid troll army. I could share my experience with you behind the scenes. So obviously I was let go from the Young Turks over a year ago. There was falsehoods put out there about me that I've already addressed several times. They weren't true. David Brock and Correct the Record did a coordinated attack on me during that process. So while I was already down with smears out there about me, calling me a rapist and all these things that just were not true, factually were not true, did not happen, David Brock and Correct the Record, I saw it because I see those bots. I've seen the same bots on other stories and going after other progressives. They were in a coordinated attack trying to prop up this falsehood about me. And I'm not covering David Brock because I have a grudge against him over that. I'm covering him because he's a propagandist who's toxic to our politics. You don't really need to be progressive, conservative, neoliberal. You should not support this kind of smear merchant. And as an example of this smear merchant, I don't typically play clips from the Young Turks, but I have no choice because this was me. Take a look at this question I posed him on the campaign trail in 2016 because Politico had broken a story that David Brock's super PAC, Correct the Record, was about to release an ad before the South Carolina primary smearing Bernie Sanders and suggesting that he's hiding something in terms of his health record. Take a look.
I read a report before I came in that your super PAC might be releasing an ad this weekend about Bernie's medical records. Can you tell me about that?
No, we don't have any plan to do that. No.
So they're wrong?
Yeah, I didn't see that, actually.
Yeah, Politico has a story that you guys are calling for.
Basically, it's not an ad, and it's not calling for anything. But I mean, I do think that, particularly for top-tier candidates, it's very usual that people will release their health records. And
well, why are you guys bringing it up now, like 2 weeks before the caucus?
It's up to the Sanders campaign to decide that. We're not charging anything or calling for anything.
So it's not like we're nervous, so we got to bring up his health?
Definitely not. No.
So I want to give you a little behind the scenes here. And by the way, if I call out other people, I got to call myself out too. Those were my early days at TYT, and I didn't challenge him hard enough. So shame on me. I should have challenged him way harder than that. That was kind of the early days of me on the campaign trail. I think I was trying to be a little too diplomatic. I think now I'm a little bit more of a bulldog with some more years of experience under my belt. But I want to give you a little. I want to give you a little behind the scenes. And I'm really not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying this so you truly understand. I've interviewed probably 1,500 to 2,000 people over the last 3 years, most of them in the field. I have never interviewed anybody up close with worse breath than David Brock. Again, this has nothing to do with his corruption and being a propagandist. This guy has the worst breath I have ever had in my face in my life. And I've had some bad breath in my face on the campaign trail. Honestly, if you look up the word halitosis, David Brock has halitosis. You could call me a mean man for saying that. You could say I'm smearing him or a personal attack. But I have to tell you, it was hard to keep a straight face. His breath was overpowering me. I remember telling my cameraman, Eric, I need to go to the hospital. I'll read you a little bit more of this nonsense. And now, though the 2018 Democratic presidential primary has only just begun, those same long knives, mostly courtesy of supporters of Sanders' prospective candidacy, are out for outgoing Congressman Beto O'Rourke of Texas, charging that he's not a true progressive. Because he's not. And it's not a personal attack. He's not a progressive. He votes with Trump 30% of the time. He voted to offshore drilling. He voted to lift the cap on the export ban. He's voted for other fossil fuel goodies. He's voted to deregulate Wall Street. I mean, this is not a progressive. It might be David Brock's kind of progressive, but it's not an actual progressive. The reason for these preemptive attacks, which has the markings of a coordinated effort. Do you hear this, man? Does he have no self-awareness? A coordinated effort? This guy runs the record. He runs a paid troll army. You know what a paid troll army is? Coordinated attacks every single day. And this man is talking about coordinated attacks from Bernie Sanders supporters? David Sirota writes a piece for The Guardian that I thought was a great piece. By the way, I've reached out to him to interview him for Status Coup. He goes through Beto O'Rourke's voting record. I mean, it's hardly like an evil cabal of progressives in a back room, coordinating to take down Beto O'Rourke. Frankly, I ain't worried about Beto O'Rourke. He's the hot girl at the dance for this dance. Come 2020, once Beto O'Rourke's message is out there, I'm not worried about Beto O'Rourke. We've seen this play before. We've seen this movie before. It's called Barack Obama and Hope and Change. Nobody's buying that again. The masses are not buying Beto O'Rourke in 2020. So he's just lying, and he's talking about coordinated attacks. There was no coordinated attack. Bernie-crats seem determined to dust off the same destructive playbook this time around. Oh, destructive playbook, like trying to send out an ad before the Iowa caucus insinuating that Bernie Sanders is dying or Bernie Sanders is hiding his medical history. Even though the attacks against O'Rourke are flimsy and misleading, O'Rourke unseated a conservative Democrat in a primary and never tacked right in an election in deep red Texas. He has run in favor of federal legislation to legalize marijuana and the impeachment of Trump. Okay, so case closed because he's for legalizing weed and impeaching Donald Trump. He's progressive. Notice those two issues have nothing to do with economic inequality. Well, legalizing marijuana has to do a lot with the high incarceration rate among African Americans. Has nothing to do with income inequality. Has nothing to do with money in politics. Has nothing to do, well, a little bit. But big picture, The issues he's talking about have nothing to do with the Democratic Party and Wall Street, have nothing to do with the fossil fuel industry, have nothing to do with big pharma, have nothing to do with big real estate developers buying off the politicians, have nothing to do with Silicon Valley buying off the politicians. So these issues make Beto O'Rourke a progressive. And although he fails their litmus test on free college tuition, their claims that his support is weak for Medicare for all don't match his record. As Senate candidate, he said he would vote for it. David Brock, apparently NBC News doesn't have like editors editing these pieces and fact checking because he moonwalked away from Medicare for all. After he won the primary, he didn't talk about Medicare for all. He wouldn't talk about Medicare for all. He started using talking points like affordable health care, access to health care, the same thing Andrew Gillum in Florida did. But NBC News doesn't care. They just put out a propagandist, let him publish whatever the hell he wants, and that's it. And by the way, what's ironic, David Brock is writing this now, but this isn't what David Brock was saying at the beginning of 2017, after the 2016 election, when David Brock realized, well, maybe we need to make inroads with these progressive Bernie Sanders voters. Maybe we need to play nice with them this time. Dear Senator Sanders, I'm with you in the fight ahead. He was with Bernie then. Bernie wasn't attacking anyone personally then. Bernie was good then. Now Bernie's bad. Bernie's bad, and Bernie's fans are bad. We don't want Bernie's fans. And it's interesting because somebody in the live chat just said, who cares about David Brock? That's kind of a dangerous thing to say. I'll tell you why it's important. I get your point, but David Brock and people like him play a huge part in the propaganda war that we're going to be facing, that the progressive movement is going to be facing, that Bernie Sanders is going to be facing, that Bernie Sanders supporters is going to be facing. David Brock and Correct the Record play a huge part in this propaganda war. Huge part. Because they have things like Correct the Record. They are going to be feeding things to the media when Bernie announces his run and planting stories with the media that the media is then going to just regurgitate and be stenographers for. That's what they did with 2016, and that's what they're going to do in 2020 because the media doesn't care if it's true. The media wants to hurt Bernie Sanders and progressive candidates because the media is owned by corporate conglomerates.